You don't get a choice there, boss.
Big sis, please.
No. You're being a...
You're take you for another. We're still gonna take you, bro. What the f*** is this, man? You stop touching me. You're getting myself. You don't need to touch me.
What a little pawn.
I want this still.
Yeah, you don't get a choice there, boss.
Big sis, please.
No. You're being a... You're secure.
No, it's, dude, my...
Dude, this is looser than
Does it
it's
have to
supposed
be
to
like
be.
this? No, it's usually like this.
That's okay.
Amen.
It's sad if you know how the cuffs are supposed to be. That means you've been in them too many times.
Lean back.
What am I going to jail for? Tell me. Explain.
I've already explained it multiple times.
What? Explain.
Lean back.
Explain.
Lean back.
Explain.
Lean back and look to the
Hey.
left. Lean back
Explain.
and look to the left.
Explain. I'm literally listening to you. You're not explaining.
I've already explained
You're
it.
being mad aggressive, bro. For no reason. You haven't explained.
I have.
What a punk.
Every time we do it. So, I don't know if he's got screws loose or what it is. He goes one month, when he's crying, when he's hard.
Explain what I
Where's
did.
your ID at?
Nowhere to be found.
Okay.
That's entitlement right there. Just all over on behavioral scale because he's never been held accountable. And he figures if I cry, they'll let me go, or maybe if I'm abusive, they'll let me go. So he's trying all the tools in his belt, probably what he uses on his parents or other people around him.
It's fine, Dave. Hey, he's in our
You when you please.
system, so. Okay.
Don't resist me.
Why are you aggressive? Why are you doing this?
Lewis, just listen to what you're told. Just listen to what you're told.
Put your hands on your mouth. Why? Why your hands on my mouth?
Let me tell you why his hand was on his mouth. He probably had his hand like this because he was told, he said, I'm going to spit in your face when he was on the boat. So you're not going to take any trout chances. You put your hand on his mouth while you're adjusting whatever they were doing. Or you keep him from biting you because you're leaning over to grab the seatbelt so that you can do it. This is a level of control that keeps him from spitting, biting you, maybe even headbutting you. There's a level of control. He's not being hurt. It is a level of control over him.
What? You're gonna what?
Sue you.
You're gonna put us all?
I said sue.
Hey, you know I
it's
hear
on camera. I said I'm gonna sue you all.
Okay.
Sue. S-U-E.
Your mouth.
You watch your mouth.
Dude, shut your mouth and what?
What a little punk, all 5'4" of them.
Do what you're told. Do what you're supposed to do.
It's like a little chihuahua out there just barking up a storm like the little dogs do.
You understand that with the most respect.
These officers right here came onto your property and told you to stop that vessel, and you pulled that vessel out.
Because I was scared for my life. I
That is a
understand I
lawful
can't do
order.
that. I understand that.
You're being
You understand I was scared.
Listen, you were being arrested by them.
Brother, you understand I was in before with the most respect. I'm scared.
About what?
Brother, you arrested me.
Hey, boss.
Did you
Hold
not?
on real quick.
Yeah.
Brother, did you not arrest me? Were you not the one?
Am I the one?
Yo, you're gonna run over my boy, dog?
Oh, no, he's good.
You idiot.
He's good.
Brother,
I
were
know.
you not the one that arrested me?
Oh, actually, I'm not the one who arrested you. It was Deputy Chris Day. I was there.
You were there. So now do you understand where my paranoia and anxiety comes
Okay,
from?
but here's the thing, man.
Stop breaking the law. Like I've said this a million times. We don't good clock check in on for shift and go, man, let's go find some people to arrest. No, we take calls, we respond, we try to restore balance in order to chaotic situations, and we deal with complaints like this, where this guy was bothering people. It bothered him so much that they called the police, the sheriff's office, to come in and deal with it.
Like, just like on
I think I want to go back.
just like on that scene, your mouth got you in more trouble than what you were actually going to be charged with. That night you were going to be let go with a criminal citation, man. You kept running your mouth just like you are right now.
But you guys told me you would talk to me. Look at what you guys did. Look where I'm going now. You think that's cool?
They tried to talk to you.
And I came back to talk to you guys. I could have really fleed and looted if I wanted to, and I didn't. I came back to talk to you guys. My dad told me that I wasn't gonna go to jail. He told me that he had to talk to you guys. That to come back home. I came back home to be respectful, bro.
How'd you find in the loot? We know who you are. We just written a warrant, dude. It didn't matter.
Exactly.
It's either the warrant would have dropped or you're going to jail tonight. It is what it is.
That's exactly right.
You run your mouth. You say
You
the wrong.
understand how anxiety
Okay,
and paranoia
but
is,
listen to me.
guys?
You run your mouth. You
But
say the
look,
wrong
in the past
things.
2
You
days, I
catch
caught
more
14
charges.
tickets, brother. 14 in the
For
past
what?
2 days. Bro, literally being targeted, bro.
Lewis.
It's not targeting. You got to take a look at your own behavior. This is a pattern of behavior on his part, not law enforcement's part.
Seriously, when they were walking you down the street there, did you?
And by the way, they will stick it to you if you have a bad attitude and you're
It's maybe one of the most loved, shared experiences in American culture. At least it used to be. You'll find out why I say that in a minute. An event that has magical ability to connect people from all walks of life as they cheer on the home team or console one another in the agony of defeat. But there is a concern that watching sports for the love of the game is being replaced
You guys made a name for us.
with a whole new sports culture,
Yes, you did.
No,
chasing victories
Didn't
for
even know
money.
you lived here.
Since the Supreme Court allowed states to legalize sports betting 8 years ago,
about you.
the industry has exploded with over $160 billion
Buddy, I
with
don't
a
care if you
B,
drink or not. That's not what we're here
$160
for.
billion
I'm telling you,
legally
like,
bet on sports last year,
Luis was taken to
especially
the local
with the
county
introduction
jail,
of
where he was
mobile
charged
and
with felony
online
fleeing
sports
from law
books.
Got him.
Now, many claim the
underage possession
legalization
of
has
alcohol. He
allowed
was taken
betting
into
on
custody
teams and
following
even
the incident.
individualized players
Drink alcohol,
to not
baby.
only become the new normal, but
Wow.
has become an
And the case
accepted
proceeded
part
through
of
the
sports
courts, with the
culture.
charges reflecting both his
Which
attempt
is
to
really
evade
hard to
officers on the
argue
water
when
and
you
his
see
behavior
sports
during the
leagues,
confrontation.
celebrities,
Well, I would love
media
to know what he
companies,
actually
social
got, if he
influencers,
got,
and more
any time out
partnering
of it,
with sports betting
fleeing
industry
and
giants.
looting,
The question
felony,
now is,
and
has this
minor consumption
normalization,
of al- or minor
along with
possession of
online
alcohol,
accessibility
and
and
then
marketing,
disorderly conduct,
centered around
which he
sports
just kept
betting,
peace and quiet of the
leading
people in
to
the
a
neighborhoods
health
and whoever they had to
crisis,
call,
a health
which
crisis
included
among
threatening
young
them.
adult
Which,
males,
when you
a
watch
group
this,
who are
it
reported
corroborates
to
what
have
they
the
told
highest
you, how he
sports
talks to
gambling
people,
rates.
How
Now, some
entitled
experts
he thinks
say
he is.
Yes.
You're going to continue to
My
get
first
held
guest,
accountable
Mason,
until
is a
he
21-year-old
learns,
college
don't
senior
break the law.
and
Don't
also
be
a
disorderly,
popular
don't bother your
sports
neighbors,
betting
don't flee
influencer,
from law enforcement,
known
and know
online
that you're not
as
gonna
the
go to jail.
intern
That's
Mason.
the bottom line. It's about
He claims,
being a good
although
citizen,
he
compliant. So,
100%
anyway,
believes
let
his
me know what you
industry
think.
targets young adults,
Comment, like,
particularly
subscribe.
college students. He
I'll
says
catch
it's
y'all next
unfair to
week.
blame the sports betting industry for gambling addiction. So, Mason, thanks for joining us.
No, Dr. Phil, thank you for having me.
So, how did you get into this?
Yeah, so it was my freshman year. I go to Providence
Show me your
College up in
hands.
Rhode Island.
Show me your
I
hands.
ended up starting out as a handicapper. They call it handicapper, and essentially I sold my picks, advertised them on the internet, and would pay me for my knowledge and my expertise.
Well, what knowledge and expertise did you have as a college freshman?
Never ends well.
To be quite honest, at the time, nothing more than like, I mean, I'm like a sports guru, so I guess like nothing more than just
2023.
a bunch of sports knowledge
Attempted
in
a
terms
traffic
of
stop
sports
after
betting.
observing a vehicle
Not much at
traveling
the
at
time,
an
and I guess that
unusually slow
says
speed.
something to how easy it was to get people to pay for my picks.
You have a slogan. What is or was your slogan? You could retire your parents.
Yeah, you could retire your parents. That's my slogan. It's like essentially just a parlay. Obviously that's an exaggeration.
Alexa,
more or
play
less,
instrumental
but, like, I
reading
honestly got it
music.
from my old boss used to have to pay for the drinks parlay. So obviously I took inspiration from him, and I was like, let me come up with something, and retire your parents is what came to mind.
Yeah, that is a little hypey, but anybody you know that's been able to
Yeah, we're gonna do a little bit of reading. We'll continue on our early days in America. We're on section 4, page 23. Yeah, I sure hope so. I sure hope so.
for us, the important thing is that people get educated as to how these punks have gotten away with this over the years, and the nasty fucking druggies and people that have fled the state and that are still here, that protect them for other reasons, and how they feed that child in animal pornography and abuse, some fake and some real. I know, it's a whole other host of investigations, just the fake shit, right? And the hazing and the tating. For Christ's sake, people. I know, I mean, it's hard to not. It's so tempting, huh? For you entrepreneurs. Right, so anyways, I hope that the proper authorities do the best they can to help these kids here at the Governor Hill Mansion in the hands of these sickos being protected by nasty fucking druggies and fraudulent individuals. I think the important thing is to understand these non-negotiable situations, and we need to educate people. Can't do anything about it. I know, so when you understand those investigations and you go, oh, well, that's why they're not going to report on it. Because they can't. So hopefully people do the best they can to bring forth the dangers and the crimes and the concerns with the over-prescribing of SSRIs, the over-vaccination of our children, the neurological damage a lot of people have endured, the blood clots, heart attacks. Many have already died. You gotta protect yourself the best you can. You can do a vaccination detox or deal with it the best you can. Yeah, it can cause overloads, heavy metal toxicity, a whole bunch of things. I mean, it's in the air we breathe, it's in everything, so it's important that we should probably learn those things, daily reminders, movement, water, appreciation for life, respecting the space and the people and the air around us. Doesn't seem like too much of that exists. A lot of hate and fear propaganda. Everything's a fucking sports match. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I wonder where all the adults are. So hopefully they understand the important thing is that we educate people as to how they've already gotten away with it and how they have fed out the child and animal pornography. It's already been done to investigators, activists, chasers, feeders. It's not a secret, okay? So we have producers here that still have custody of children that have been abused in horrific ways, and people want to think they're well taken care of and try to justify the bullshit they've been doing to us, you sick fucks. It's fucking disgusting when you see what's been going on here. So hopefully the proper authorities do what they can to educate people on that. We're going to keep speaking out until that gets reported on, or until we can't breathe or speak. And we're very grateful we can. All right, section 4, page 23.
But the early colonial writers were still more impressed by another kind of wildlife. The Indians, who indeed were generally regarded until recent times rather as a part of the fauna of the country than as human beings capable of playing any part in the making of American culture. Perhaps French excelled in detailed accounts of the savages, but no small part of colonial literature in the English tongue is devoted to the same subject. Nothing in the New World stirred more deeply the imagination of the immigrants from the Old World, and perhaps nothing more nearly concerned the welfare of the infant colonies. There was scarcely a writer who did not have something to say about the savages. Captain John Smith, who had already paid some attention to them in A True Relation, published in a map of Virginia a lengthy and, on the whole, a careful account. Much of what is to be found condensed in these few paragraphs from his publication of 1612. They are very strong, of an able body, and full of agility, able to endure to lie in the woods under a tree by the fire in the worst of winter, or in the weeds and grass in ambuscado in summer. They are inconstant in everything. But what? Alexa, volume 1. Alexa, volume 1. They are inconstant in everything. They spell everything. 2 words. EVERIETHING. Everything. But what fear constraineth them to keep? Crafty, timorous, quick of apprehension, and very ingenious. Some are of disposition fearful, some bold, most catalyst, all savage, generally covetous of copper, beads, and such like trash. They are soon moved to anger, and so malicious that they seldom forget an injury. They seldom steal from another. They seldom steal one from another, lest their couriers should reveal it, and so they be pursued to punish. That they are thus feared in certain, CERTAINE, that they are thus feared, that they are thus feared is certain, but that any can reveal their offenses by conjuration, I am doubtful. Conjuration. The women are careful not to be suspected of dishonesty without the leave of their husbands. Each household knoweth their own lands and gardens, and most live of their own labors. For their apparel, they are sometime covered with the skins of wild beasts, which in winter are dressed with hair, but in summer without. Alexa, volume 3. Alexa, volume 4. The better sort use large mantles of deer skins, not much differing in fashion from the Irish mantles. Some embroidered with white beads, some with copper, other painted after the manner. But the common sort have scarce to cover their nakedness, but with grass. The leaves of trees are such like. We have seen some use mantles made of turkey feathers, so prettily wrought and woven with threads that nothing could be discerned but the feathers. That was exceeding warm and very handsome. But the women are always covered about their middles with a skin of very shamefast, to be seen bare. They adorn themselves most with copper beads and paintings. Their women, some have their legs, hands, breast, and face cunningly embroidered with diverse works, has beasts, serpents, artificially wrought into their flesh with black spots. In each ear, commonly, they have 3 great holes, whereat they hang chains, bracelets, or copper. Some of their men wear in the holes a small green and yellow colored snake, near half a yard in length, which, crawling and lapping herself about his neck, oftentimes familiarly, would kiss his lips. Others wear a dead rat tied by the tail. Some on their heads wear the wing of a bird, or some large feather with a rattle. Those rattles are somewhat like the chap of rapier, but less. Alexa, volume 3. Which they take from the tail of a snake. Many have the whole skin of a hawk, or some strange fowl stuffed with the wings abroad. Others a broad piece of copper, and some the hand of their enemy dried. Their heads and shoulders are painted with red, with the root pecone grated to powder mixed with oil. This they hold in summer to preserve from the heat and in winter from the cold. Many other forms of paintings they use, but he is the most gallant, that is, the most monstrous to behold. Their buildings and habitations are for the most part by the rivers, or not a fair distance from such spring. Their houses are built like our arbors, of small young springs, bowed and tied, and so close, covered with mats, or the barks of trees very handsomely, that notwithstanding either wind, rain, or weather, they are as warm as stoves, but very smoky. Yet at the top of the house there is a hole made for the smoke that go into, right over the fire. Against the fire they lie on little hurdles of reeds covered with a mat borne from the ground and foot, and more by a hurdle of wood. On these round about the house, they lie heads and points, one by the other against the fire, some covered with mats, some with skins, and some stark naked lie on the ground, from 6 to 20 in a house. The houses are in the midst of their fields or gardens, which are small plots of ground, some 20, some 40, some 100, some 200, some more, some less, sometimes 2 to 100 of those houses together, or but a little separated by groves of trees. Near their habitations is little small wood or old trees, or the ground by reason of their burning of them for fire, so that a man may gallop a horse amongst these woods anyway, but where the creeks or rivers shall hinder. Men, women, and children have their several names according to the several humor of their parents. Their women, they say, are easily delivered of child, yet though they love children very dearly, to make them handy in the coldest mornings they wash them in the rivers by painting and ointments, so tan their skins, that after a year or two no weather will hurt them. The men bestow their times in fishing, hunting, wars, and such manlike exercises, scorning to be seen in any womanlike exercise, which is the cause that the women be very painful, and the men often idle. The women and children do the rest of the work. They make mats, baskets, pots, mortars, pound their corn, make their bread, prepare their victual, plant their corn, gather their corn, bear all kind of burdens, and such like. They spelt it A-L. Their fire they kindle presently by chafing a dry pointed stickle in a hole of a little square piece of wood, that firing itself would so fire moss, leaves, or any such dry thing that will quickly burn. In March and April they live much upon their fishing wares and feed on fish, turkeys, and squirrels. In May and June they plant their fields and live most of acorns, walnuts, and fish. They spell June with an I, I-U-N-E, and they spell peace, P-E-E-C-E, and N-E-A-N-I-E. There's a lot of different spellings. But to mend their diet, some disperse themselves in small companies and live upon fish, beasts, crabs, oysters, and land tortoises, strawberries, mulberries, and such like. In June, July, July is spelled I-U-L-I-E. They spell June and July both with an I. In June and July and August, They feed upon the roots of toknoth berries, fish, and green wheat. It is strange to see how their bodies alter with their diet. Alexa, Volume 1. Even as their deer and wild beasts, they seem fat and lean, strong and weak. Powhatan, their great king, and some others that are provident, roast their fish and flesh upon hurdles, as before is expressed, and keep it till scarce times. Often, especially when there is no threat of hostilities between the two races, the Indians impress their white neighbors as ludicrous. The authors of Mort's relation tell comical things of the famous Maciot, who, even when fortified with a draught of liquor that made him sweat all the while after, he was much impressed by English prowess, that all the while he sat by the governor he trembled for fear. On another occasion, according to the same book, the English were lodged as the guests of Maciot under peculiarly uncomfortable but mirth-provoking circumstances. Late it grew, but victuals he offered none, for indeed he had not any, being he came so newly home. So we desired to go to rest. He laid us on the bed with himself and his wife. They sat at one end and we the other, it being only planks laid a foot from the ground, and a thin mat upon them. Two more of his chief men, for want of room, pressed by and upon us, so that we were worse weary of our lodging than our journey. Alexa, Volume 3. The next day, being Thursday, many of their sachems, or pretty governors, came to see us, and many of their men also. There they went to their manner of games for skins and knives. There we challenged them to shoot with them for skins, but they durst not, only they desired to see one of us shoot as a mark, who shooting with hail shot. They wondered to see the mark so full of holes. About 1 o'clock, Maciot brought 2 fishes that he had shot. They were like bream, but 3 times so big, and better meat. These being boiled, there were at least 40 looked for share in them. The most eat of them. This meal only we had in 2 nights and a day, and had not one of us brought a partridge. We had taken our journey, also spelt with an I, we had taken our journey fasting, very important, as he was to have us stay with them longer. But we desired to keep the Sabbath at home, and feared we should either be lightheaded for want of sleep, for what with bad lodging, the savages barbarous singing, for they used to sing themselves asleep, lice and fleas within doors, and mosquitoes without. We could hardly sleep all the time of our being there, we much fearing that if we should stay any longer, we should not be able to recover home for want of strength. So that on the Friday morning before sunrising, we took our leave and departed, Maciot being both grieved and ashamed that he could no better entertain us, and retaining tis quantitum to send from place to place to produce truck for us, and appointing another called Tokhamamon in his place, whom he had found faithful before and after upon all occasions. To Thomas Morin, no lover of his Puritan neighbors of Plymouth and the Bay, the Indian seemed in many ways better than the white colonist. He praised the savages for their tractable nature and their love towards the English. Their existence, he found, was a happy one, though, guided only by the light of nature. Few writers who knew the Indians from long experience contributed much to the European legend of the noble savage. Morin, however, endowed the savage with a heroic ancestry. Some later writers, especially religionists, desirous of awaking interest in projects for converting the Indians, were wont to imagine that the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel had strayed into America and peopled that continent. But Morton, with less enthusiasm for biblical than the classical history, traced the origin of the Indians to the Trojan warriors scattered abroad after the fall of Troy, and made the interesting discovery that the Indian language contained many Greek and Latin words. Like Captain John Smith, he believed that the Indians were born white, but he says their mothers, in their fancy, make a bath of walnut leaves, husks, and walnuts and such things, as will stain their skin forever. And this nursery tale of Morton's is indeed a fair example of the scientific value of much that was written about the Aborigines by writers more intent on entertaining their readers than on searching out the truth. Much mirth-provoking comment on the Indians is to be found in many other writers in the time. Jocelyn, for example, reports the savages universally guilty of cannibalism, but, says he, with a little flourish of national prejudice, they will not eat a Spaniard till they have kept him 2 or 3 days to wax tender, because his flesh is so hard. Jocelyn's Indians have, as one might expect, of so entertaining a writer, a number of unusual accomplishments, not the least of which is their ability to make speeches extempore, number of speeches extempore in perfect hexameter verse. This bit of description of a native dance illustrates well enough the plain-spoken manner of John Lawson in his lengthy accounts of the Indians in A New Voyage to Carolina, 1709. This female gang held their dance for above 6 hours, being all of them a white lather, like a running horse that has just come in from his race. Of the great number of colonial writers dealing with the Indians, however, probably none wrote with greater authority than did Daniel Gookin in the 17th and Cadwallader Calden in the 18th century. Their works, less entertaining than some others, must remain the classics of their kind and time. Naturally, the colonial records of observations on Indian life are usually interspread with narratives of conflicts between the white men and the red men, and there are numerous histories of the Indian Wars, as well as the soon found and extremely difficult to keep on friendly terms with the natives, who were suspicious of the strange race which now trespassed on the heretro unchallenged possessions of the red men. Yeah, the Arizona Redskins. Yeah, I think they had to change their name because some people thought it was racist. Yeah, strange. It was more than a century after the first voyage of Columbus that permanent English settlements began to take root in America. Irregular traders had already aroused some hostility, and something was already known in England of the Indian character. I don't know, should we change the term white knights or black knights? Lady in red? Is dancing with me, lady in red. The instructions of the London Virginia Company to its colonists when they started from home contained a warning, soon amply justified by events, that it would be impossible to avoid a clash. In New England, the Pilgrims had hardly landed before the Indians were upon them. Perhaps no part of Bradford's simple and charming journal is more calculated to stir the imagination than his history of the first encounter. But presently, all on the Sedan, Alexa, Volume 1, but presently, all on the Sedan, they heard a great and strange cry, which they knew to be the same voices they heard in the night. Though they cried, varied their notes, and one of their company, being abroad, came running in and cried, Men, Indians, Indians, and withal their arrows came flying amongst them. Their men ran with all speed to recover their arms, as by the good providence of God they did. And in the meantime of those that were there ready, tow muskets were discharged at them, and 2 more stood ready in the entrance of their rendezvous, but were commanded not to shoot till they could take full aim at them. And the other 2 charged again with all speed, for there were only 4 had arms there, and defended the barricado, which was first assaulted. Alexa, Volume 3. Alexa, Volume 3. Alexa, play more upbeat classical music.
Here's upbeat classical music on Amazon Music.
The cry of the Indians was dreadful, especially when they saw their men run out of the rendezvous towards the shallop to recover their arms, the Indians wheeling about upon them, but some running out with coats of maul on and cutlasses in their hands. They soon got their arms and let fly among them, and quickly stopped their violence. Yet there was a lusty man, and no less valiant, stood behind a tree with half a musket shoot, and let his arrows fly at them. He was seen shoot 3 arrows, which were all avoided. He stood 3 shot of a musket, till one, taking full aim at him, and made the bark or splinters of the tree fly about his ears, after which he gave an extraordinarily strike, and away they went, all of them. They left some to keep the shallop, and followed them about 1/4 mile, and shouted once or twice, and shot of 2 or 3 pieces, and so returned. This they did, that they might conceive that they were not afraid of them, or any way discouraged. Thus it pleased God to vanquish their enemies and give them deliverance, and by his spy-tail providence so to dispose that not any one of them were either hurt or hit through their arrows, came close by them, and on every side and on every side of them, and sundry of their coats, which hung up in their barricado, were shot and throw. Afterwards they gave God solemn thanks and praise for their deliverance, and gathered up a bundle of their arrows, and sent them into England afterward by the master of the ship. And called that place the First Encounter. Alexa, play classical reading music.
The playlist.
Like a night in Bangkok.
Free on Amazon Music.
I get my kicks above the waistline, sunshine. But sometimes, throughout the colonial period, there was the ever-lurking danger of Indian incursions into the settlements of the whites. The Virginia Massacre of 1622, the Picot War, King Philip's War, and the troubles in Virginia at the time of Bacon's Rebellion marked the bitter struggle which the ill-organized, ill-equipped savages carried on single-handed against the encroaching Englishmen. Later came the long series of French and Indian wars in which the Indians participated on both sides. Men like Roger Williams, Daniel Gookin, and William Penn might question at times the justness of the white man's cause. But in general, the colonial attitude in such crises was one of intense hatred of the savages. Consciences were easily soothed, and extreme cruelty towards an enemy who was himself extremely cruel seemed just to most of the colonists. John Underhill, the commander of the Bay, men who aided in the attack on the Indian fort at Mystic during the Pequot War, put the matter simply enough. It may be demanded, why should you be so furious, some have said. Should not Christians have more mercy and compassion? But I would refer you to David's war. Sometimes the scripture declareth women and children must perish with their parents. Sometimes the case alters, but we will not dispute it now. We had sufficient light from the word of God for our proceedings. Old Testament examples weighed heavily with the Puritans, and it was easy for them to find precedents enough for harsh treatment of the enemies of a people chosen of God. Increase Mather, who began his history of King Philip's war with the assertion that God had given the English Israel, the land of the heathen, for a rightful possession, as his son records in Parentator, tense with excitement during the bitter conflict, and was often at prayer, not without some effect, as he seems to have believed that Philip might be struck down. William Hubbard, whose book on the Indian Wars in New England followed close up that of Increase Mather, and caused the latter to hasten the completion of his work in order to be first pressed, was likewise obviously prejudiced. Oh, sure, we learned about all this when we were kids, about a lot of things with that history. Yeah, we actually used to sing a song, remember, 1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indians, 4 little, 5 little, 6 little Indians, 7 little, 8 little, 9 little Indians, 10 little Indian voices. And I remember all the commercials and to show the Indian crying a teardrop when he'd see a piece of litter. And so we'd sing the song, if you see a piece of litter, pick it up. If you see a piece of litter, pick it up. You can help save up our planet, so pick it up our planet. If you see a piece of litter, pick it up. Yeah, I mean, just stuff like that. Yeah, and just about unity, not being racist, right? Equality, integration, learning about migration. Yeah, we learned about all these things. It seems like a lot of people different. Like a lot of people did not learn about those things, and it's very different from the way we were brought up. Yeah, I know. We get them all the time coming up from the Bible Belt and other places, talking about racism, trying to find the racist white supremacist people. I know, and then you guys want to knock it off with your stupid jokes. I know, because they're coming up from the Bible Belt area with these activists. I know, and they're trafficking drugs too, and they get them going, and they feed them drugs and weapons, and they get them scared. I know, it's fun, isn't it? I know, hopefully people can grow the fuck up and just get real and do what's right. Anyways. I know, it gets old, doesn't it? Daniel Gookin, it is true, wrote an apology for the conduct on the Christian Indians during King Philip's War, but for the most part, the Indian point of view naturally found no adequate expression. There were other formal histories of both the Pequot War and King Philip's War, but perhaps the most readable account of all that were written was the very informal, entertaining passages relating to Philip's War, in which Thomas Church set down the reminiscences of his father, Benjamin Church, most jovial of Indian fighters, keen as a butcher for slaughter, but not much troubled with the bitter hatred that inspired most of those in the contest. He turned sour-faced Indian captives into enthusiastic allies with no more ceremony than a clap on the back and a word of encouragement. Within a few moments after their capture, the surliest of them were, if we may believe, Church transformed in this way. Catching the contagion of his success and good humor, they were willing enough to help him ferret out their own people who still remained hostile. Even those who were impossible as recruits seem to have yielded to the fascination of our author's personality. When he captured an Indian called Sam Barrow, one of the worst offenders, he soon succeeded, so he tells us, in making the hardened wretch confess that the sentence of death was quite just, and that he was indeed ashamed to live any longer. Church labored with some success to keep the squaw Sachem of his part of Rhode Island from joining with Philip, but he was also one of the most active leaders in the pursuit of Philip himself, took part in the famous capture of the Swamp Stockade, and was present at the fight in which Philip was slain. King's Philip War was also the theme of more than one of the New England's verse makers, and it was Benjamin Thompson, reputed the first native-born American poet, who wrote the most readable account of this kind in his New England Crisis, 1676. Now, the New England Crisis, a good one to read. After drawing a pleasant picture of earlier colonial times, which already wore for him a halo of sentiment, he paints in contrast the present fearful crisis. Not ink but blood and tears now serve the turn to draw the figure of New England urn. New England's hour of passion is at hand. No power except divine can it withstand. He has nothing but scorn and fierce hatred for Philip. He sees no vestige of the noble savage in this leader of a forlorn hope. And here methinks I see this greasy lout with all his pagan slaves coiled round about, assuming all the majesty his throne of rotten stump or of the rugged stone could yield, casting some bacon rind-like looks, enough to fight a student from his books. And in a similar vein, he gives directions to the artist who would attempt to picture the Indians. If a painter overtrack my pen, let him in olive color mix those elves to trim. Of such a hue let many thousand thieves be drawn like scarecrows clad with oaken leaves, whose locks Medusas, snakes, do ropes resemble, and ghostly looks would make Achilles tremble. Limn them besmeared with Christian blood and oiled, with fat out of white humane bodies boiled, drawn them with clubs like moles and full of stains, like Vulcans anviling New England brains. Anviling? Would I say anviling? Anviling. That's what I said. Oh, I said anviling. And it's anviling? All right. Like Vulcans anviling New England brains. Gonna get rabies. Passages describing the doings of the white man add greatly to the interest of his narrative. He tells of the preparations they were making for the war. Some go to battle willingly, others are so compelled to go. He describes the parting of husbands and wives and of young lovers. He draws his heroes in epic proportions and with plentiful allusion to classical myth and history. But perhaps nothing in the long poem is better than those lines from the brief Aritis Fantic. Aritis Fantic. I don't think I've ever heard it worded that way, except for here. Aritis Fantic sketch of women's part in the war, which is printed as a separate piece of the end of the book. Yeah, you hear aristocratic, aristocratian, aristocrat, whatever. This is Aristophanic. 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 A tribe of female hands, but manly hearts forsake at home their pasty crust and tarts to knead the dirt. The samplers down they hurl. Their undulating silks they closely furl. In another rude set of verses on King's Philip War, published the same year, has Thompson's by Peter Folger, maternal grandfather of Benjamin Franklin. There was a clever attack on a current theory that God's displeasure, as shown by the Indian troubles, was partly due to the presence in the colony of persons not of the orthodox Puritan faith. This view was indeed suggested officially by the committee which the General Court at Boston appointed to study the causes of the great calamity. Folger, himself a dissenter of a minority sect, made a different diagnosis in the vigorous but unmusical lines of A Looking Glass for the Times. One of the chief causes of the trouble, he announces, is the intolerance of the Puritan state, not its tolerance. But 'tis for that same crying sin the rulers will not own, and that whereby much cruelty to brethren has been shown, the sin of persecution such laws established. Later Indian wars are recorded at length in the works of such colonial writers as Fenhollow, Niles, and Colden, but of such historians, perhaps perhaps Colden alone deserves high praise. His work, The History of the Five Indian Nations, Alexa, Volume 1, benefits by the author's first-hand acquaintance with the virtues from their vices. He was sensitive to literary qualities and the actual matter of the book of great historical importance, as it has to do with the relation between the colonies, particularly New York, and those tribes of Indians who exercised the greatest influence on the outcome of the struggle between the English and the French in America. Perhaps the chief weakness of Colden's historical work is a certain partisan purpose that was, in some degree, his inspiration. He wished to show the necessity of a stricter policy against the French. Right, so go back into this time, because we're in the New England area. Yeah, so if you go back into this time, the late 1600s, early 1700s, go over to California, Texas, Florida, and those areas. Yeah, it's interesting, and then you start to understand, migration and the lines. This land is your land, this land is my land. Yeah, hi, we're today. My name's Mary. I really hope the proper authorities here in Augusta, Maine address the sick pedophiles with our children. Yeah, they're sick pedophiles here. They make child and animal pornography and feed it out to activist groups who profit from oppressed people. The fuck? I know, right? It's amazing, isn't it? I really hope they get real soon and address these facts and concerns. Anyways. He was sensitive to the literary qualities of the actual matter of the book of his great historical importance, and it has to do with the relation between the colonies, particularly New York and those tribes, of Indians who exercised a greater influence on the outcome of the struggle between the English and the French in America. Perhaps the chief weakness of Colden's historical work is a certain partisan purpose that was, in some degree, his inspiration. He wished to show the necessity of a stricter policy against the French. Alexa, Volume 3. Of the tales of Indian captives, incidences inevitably growing out of the long series of wars, a considerable number achieved printed form before the end of the colonial period. Two of the most interesting had, however, no connection with any of the great struggles already enumerated. The most famous of all Indian captives recorded in English is doubtless Captive John Smith, but the account which he first wrote, and in which he makes no mention of the rescue of Pocahontas, and according to which indeed there was no occasion for such a rescue, is so little known that it deserves to be quoted at some length. Here we went ashore, being some 12 miles higher than the barge had been, to refresh ourselves during the boiling of our victuals. One of the Indians I took with me to see the nature of the soil and to cross the bows of the river. The other Indian I left with M. Robinson and Thomas Emery, with their matches, light, and order to discharge a piece for my retreat at the first sight of any Indian. But within a quarter of an hour I heard a loud cry and a howling of Indians, but no warning. Peace. Suppose them surprised, and that the Indians had betrayed us. Presently I seized him and bound his arms fast to my hand in a garter, with my pistol ready bent to be revenged on him, and he advised me to fly and seemed ignorant of what was done. But as he went discoursing, I was struck with an arrow on the right thigh, but without harm. Upon this occasion I espied 2 Indians drawing their bows, which I prevented in discharging a French pistol. By that I had charged again. 3 or 4 more did the like. For the first fell down and fled. At my discharge they did the like. My hind I made my barricado, who offered not to strive. 20 or 30 arrows were shot at me, but short 3 or 4 times. I had discharged my pistol ere the king of Pemanuck, called Opechancanough, with 200 men, environed me, each drawing their bow, which done, they laid upon the ground, yet without shot. My hind treated betwixt them and me of conditions of peace. He discovered me to be the captain. My request was to retire to the boat. They demanded my arms. The rest, they said, were slain. Only me they would reserve. The Indian importuned me not to shoot, and retiring, being the midst of a low quagmire, and minding them more than my steps, I stepped fast into the quagmire, and also the Indian in drawing me forth. Thus surprised, I resolved to tire their mercies. My arms I cast from me, till which none durst approach me. Being seized on me, they drew me out and led me to the king. I presented him with a compass dial, describing my best means, the use thereof, whereat he so amazingly admitted he suffered me to proceed to a discourse of the roundness of the earth, the course of the time, moon, sun, stars, and planets, with kind speeches and bread he requited me, conducting me where the canoe lay, and John Robinson slain, with 20 or 30 arrows in him. Emery I saw not. I perceived by the abundance of fires all over the woods, at each place I expected when they would execute me. Yet they used me with what kindness they could. The next night I lodged at a hunting town of Prahamatas, and the next day arrived at Waranamako upon the river of Pamanak, where the great king is resident. By the way, we passed by the top of another little river, which is betwixt the two, called Panakatak. The most of this country, though desert, yet exceeding fertile, good timber, most hills and dales, in each valley a crystal spring. Arriving at Warmakako, their emperor proudly lying upon the bedstead, a foot high upon the 10 or 12 mats, richly hung with main chains of great pearls about his neck, and covered with a great covering of rahakams. At his head sat a woman, at his feet another, on each side sitting upon a mat upon the ground were ranged his chief men on each side of the fire, 10 in a rank, and behind them was as many young women, each a great chain of white beads over their shoulders, their heads painted in red with such a grave and mystical countenance. Alexa, Volume 1, has drove me to admiration to see such state in a naked salvage. He kindly welcomed me with good words and great platters of sun-dry victuals, assuring me his friendship and my liberty within 4 days. He much delighted in Apashan Kohoff's relation of what I had described to him, and oft examined me upon the same. He asked me the cause of our coming, and I told him in being fight with the Spaniards, our enemy, being overpowered, near put to retreat, and by extreme weather put to this shore, where landing at Chesapeake, the people shot at us, but the Kalawaktan, they kindly used us. We, by signs, demanded fresh water. They described us up the river, was all fresh water, at Passaplay, and also kindly they used us. Our pensy being leak, we were in a forest to stay to mend her, till Captain Newport, my father, came to conduct us away. Alexa, Volume 3. He demanded why we went further with our boat. I told him in that I would have occasion to talk of the back sea, that on the other side of the main, where was salt water, my father had a child slain, which we suppose Monacan, whose enemy, had done, whose death we intended to revenge. After good deliberation, he began to describe me the countries beyond the falls, with many of the rest, confirming what not only OPEC canoes and an Indian, which had been prisoner to Powhatan, had before told me. But some called it 5 days, some 6, some 8, where the Sadie water dashed amongst many stones and rocks, each storm which caused oft times the head of the river to be brackish. Ankh-Maclook he described to be the people that had slain my brother, whose death he would revenge. He described also upon the same sea a mighty nation called Pohoktaknak, a fierce nation that did eat men, and warred with people of Moyasner territories, where the year before they had slain 100. He signified their crowns were shaven, long-haired to the neck, tied on a knot, swords like pollexes. Beyond them he described people with short coats, and slaves to the elbows, and sleeves to the elbows, that passed that way in ships like ours. Many kingdoms he described me to the head of the bay, which seemed to be a mighty river, ensuing from mighty mountains betwixt the two seas, the people closed at Okahawan. He also confirmed, and the southerly countries also, as as the rest that reported us to be within a day and a half at Mangogi, 2 days of Chawanok, 6 from Ranok, to the south part of the Black Sea. He described a country called Anon, where they have abundance of brass and houses, walled hussars. I requited his discourse, seeing that pride he had in his great and spacious dominions, seeing that all he knew were under his territories. In describing to him the territories of Europe, which was subject to our great king, whose subject I was innumerable multitude of ships, I gave him to understand the noise of trumpets, and terrible manner of fighting, were under Captain Newport, my father, whom I entitled the Muramez, which they call King of the Waters, and at his greatness he admired, and not a little feared. He desired me to forsake Paspalay, and to live with him upon his river, a country called Kapahasawik. He promised to give me corn, venison, or what I wanted to feed us, hatchets and copper, we should make him, and none should disturb us. This request I promised to perform, and thus, having all the kindness he could devise, sought to content me. He sent me home with 4 men, one that usually carried my gown and knapsack after me, 2 other loaded with bread, and one to accompany me. Such was the account published in 1608. In a true relation, it was not until later years that Smith expanded the story and introduced the well-known episode of Pocahontas, which has proved to be his chief claim to popular favor and has afforded an attractive battleground for historical critics. Of later narratives of Indian captivity, perhaps none is more interesting than Jonathan Dickinson's account in God's Protecting Providence of a band of Quakers shipwrecked on the coast of Florida, and there captured by the Indians. Here is Dickinson's story of the capture. Within 2 or 3 hours after the departure of the 2 Indians, some of our people, being near the breach or strand, returned and said the Indians were coming in a very great number, and running and shouting. About this time the storm was much abated. The rain ceased, and the sun appeared, which had been hid from us several days, and most of the Indians went to the vessel, casting forth whatever they could lay hold on, except rum, sugar, molasses, beef, and pork. But their Kaskri, for so they call their king, with about 30 more, came down to us in a furious manner, having a dismal aspect and foaming at the mouth. Their weapons were large Spanish knives, except their casquis, who had a bayonet that belonged to the master of the vessel. They rushed in upon us and cried, Nicolier, Nicolier. We understood them not at first, but they, repeating to us often at last, cried España, or Spaniard, by which we understood them, that the first they meant English, but they were answered to the latter in Spanish. Ye to which replied, No, España, no, but all cried, Nicolier, Nicolier. We are setting on our chest boxes and trunks, and some on the ground. The Indians surrounded us, but we stirred nor more, not but sat at all, or most of us very calm and still, and some of us in good frame and spirit, being freely given up to the will of God. Whilst we were thus sitting as a people, almost unconcerned, these bloody-minded creatures placed themselves each behind one, kicking and throwing away the bushes that were nigh or under their feet. The Kaski had placed himself behind me, standing on the chest which I sat upon. and they all had their arms extended with their knives at their hands, ready to execute their bloody design, some taking hold of us by the heads, with their knees set against our shoulders, and in this posture they seemed to wait for the cascasie to begin. But they were high in words, which we understood not. But on a sudden it pleased the Lord to work wonderfully for our preservation, and instantly all these savage men were struck dumb, and like men amazed for the space of a quarter of an hour, in which time their countenances fell, and they looked like another people. Then they quitted their places they had taken behind us, and came in amongst us, requiring to have all our chests, trunks, and boxes unlocked, which being done, they divided all that was in them. Our money the caskie took to himself, privately hiding it in the bushes. Then they went to pulling off our clothes, leaving each of us only a pair of breeches or an old coat, except my wife and child, Robert Barrow, and our master, from whom they took but little that day. Having thus done, they asked us again, "Nickleer, Nickleer," but we answered by saying, "Pennsylvania?" So someone is referring Nickleer to nickel and Pennsylvania to silver. Interesting. I don't know. Could probably look up the history. It's fun to learn about, huh? We'll pause there at section 5. I'll probably read that later. So you're welcome. Yes, thank you.